09, Icebreaker Infiltration. After the crows had settled down from the stressful train heist, the group gathered in their dimly lit hideout to discuss the latest news and decide their next move. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the lingering stress of their recent escapade. Jack, ever the leader, broke the silence. "All right, everyone, the unseen want us to proceed with the mission provided by Nicholas Knightwood. We can't ignore this." Rabbit's Foot, his eyes sharp with determination, nodded. "I agree. It might align with our purpose in Doskvol. We need to see Nicholas." His voice was steady, but the slight tremor in his hand betrayed the weight of their task. The decision made, the group set off to meet Nicholas at the Shadows Denver. The Shadows Den stood as a beacon of mystery north of the Six Towers district, a refuge where whispers of secrets mingled with the clinking of glasses. Its proprietor, known only as the Whisper, orchestrated this clandestine haven from behind the bar, a figure veiled in shadow and rumor. As they entered the den, the atmosphere swallowed them whole. Velvet curtains were drawn tight against prying eyes, and candlelight cast long shadows across the room. Ornate tapestries adorned the walls, their dark hues hinting at the secrets they concealed. Behind the bar stood Ezra Nightshade, a formidable figure whose steely gaze and silent demeanor lent an air of authority to his every movement. He acknowledged them with a slight nod, his eyes keenly scanning the room for any signs of trouble. Despite his stoic exterior, there was a glint of mischief in his eyes, hinting at a hidden depth beneath his enigmatic facade. The group found a secluded corner and waited. The tension was palpable as they exchanged glances, each lost in their own thoughts. When Nicholas finally arrived, Rabbit's Foot tried to buy him a drink, but Nicholas shook his head. "Just water, thanks," he said, his voice soft but firm. After some small talk, Nicholas got straight to the point. "I need your help with a crucial mission," he began, leaning in conspiratorially. "There's a secret meeting happening at the Iceberg Lounge. I need you to infiltrate this meeting and bring back information." Jack's eyes narrowed. "The Iceberg Lounge? That's Cobblepot's territory. This won't be easy." Nicholas nodded, his expression serious. "I know." He paused, letting it sink in. Rabbit's Foot leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "And the crew?" he asked. Under the command of Osvald Cobblepot, Nicholas continued, "The Iceberg Lounge serves as both a floating palace of decadence and a haven for the criminal elite. The ship is manned by a crew of cutthroats and mercenaries, each sworn to uphold the Cobblepot name and defend their territory against all who would challenge their authority." The room fell silent as the gravity of the mission weighed on everyone. Jack's jaw tightened. "We've dealt with worse," he said, his voice filled with determination. Rabbit's Foot nodded, his resolve hardening. "Just tell us what we need to know, and we'll handle the rest." Nicholas looked at each of them in turn, his expression grave. "This won't be easy. The Iceberg Lounge is heavily guarded. You'll need to be on your toes. But if anyone can pull this off, it's you." Nicholas leaned forward, his expression more serious than before. "This meeting is crucial," he said, his tone carrying an edge of urgency. Rabbit's Foot, leaning against the table with a frown, pressed for more details. "What exactly are we walking into? We need more than just a general idea if we're to pull this off." Nicholas's gaze hardened. "I wish I could provide more, but I'm constrained by the situation. Osvald Cobblepot possesses the Millennium Eye." The mention of the Millennium Eye made the room fall into a tense silence. Harlequina, usually the most composed, looked visibly apprehensive. "The Millennium Eye? That's the device that lets him read minds. If he senses any specific knowledge or intent, it could spell disaster for us." Nicholas nodded, his eyes betraying his own concern. "Exactly. With such a potent ability at his disposal, I can't risk giving you more information than necessary. The less you know, the less there is for him to detect." Jack, his brow furrowed, tried to understand the full scope of the situation. So, what exactly are we supposed to do? Nicholas sighed. All you need to know is that there's a secret meeting happening aboard the Iceberg Lounge. Your task is to infiltrate the meeting and gather whatever information you can. You'll need to be discreet and gather only what's pertinent. Harry Potter, his curiosity piqued, interjected. Why can't you send your own workers aboard? Surely, they'd be up to the task. Nicholas shook his head. I can't risk it. If Cobblepot reads the mind of one of my spies, the whole operation is compromised. They'd know everything I've planned and more. I need you, the Crows, because I trust your skills. You're used to operating with minimal information and improvising on the fly. Harlequina's apprehension was clear in her voice. It's a huge risk. We're walking into a situation with very little guidance and a powerful enemy with the ability to uncover our intentions. Nicholas's expression softened slightly as he reassured them. I understand your concerns, but I have faith in your abilities. You're the best chance I have of getting this information without risking everything. I trust you'll handle it with the discretion and skill required. Jack gave a determined nod. We'll do it. We'll find a way to get the information without letting Cobblepot know what's going on. Rabbit's Foot placed a firm hand on Nicholas's shoulder, his expression resolute. We'll get the job done. But you need to know, this isn't going to be easy. Nicholas met their gazes with a mix of gratitude and worry. I'm aware. That's why I'm counting on you. Just remember. Stay alert, stick to the shadows, and trust in your instincts. Good luck. As the group left the Shadow's den, Nicholas stopped them at the door and handed Jack a sealed envelope. Jack opened it, revealing 4 tickets to the Iceberg Lounge. You'll go in through the front doors as common customers, Nicholas explained. Once inside, find and intercept a man called Alaric. He handed them a small, neatly written card with Alaric's description. Good luck, Nicholas said, his voice heavy with the weight of the mission. The group set out a couple of days later, each leaving their most dangerous possessions behind. Rabbit's Foot reluctantly set his Millennium ring on his desk. Harry Potter placed his Millennium rod in a locked drawer. Jack, with a sigh, removed his enchanted ring and hid it in a secret compartment at their base. Harlequina was heartbroken as she hugged her pet dog tightly, whispering promises of a quick return. On the day of the mission, they boarded the first boat, a carrier that would take them to the Iceberg Lounge, anchored in deep waters. The security guards on the boat were thorough, confiscating any weapons and sharp objects. Harry grumbled as he handed over his hidden knife, and Rabbit's Foot winced when they found a small blade in his boot. This security is intense, Harry muttered, glancing around warily. The rest of the group nodded in agreement, each of them feeling the weight of the mission pressing down harder. Upon arrival at the Iceberg Lounge, the sheer size of the vessel took their breath away. It cut through the water with an imposing presence, its sleek hull adorned with intricate carvings and foreboding symbols. The crimson penguin flag of the Cobblepots flew ominously from the main mast. The Crows were directed to the common lounge, a bustling area filled with patrons laughing, drinking, and gambling. The richer clients were led to a more secluded, lavish VIP area. Rabbit's Foot observed the velvet ropes and guarded entrances to the VIP lounge, leaning close to Harry. The meeting must be in there. We need to find a way to infiltrate it. Harry nodded, scanning the room. First, we need to find this Alaric guy and steal his identity. Blend in, keep your eyes open. The Iceberg Lounge was packed, and the crowd moved like a restless sea. Jack's sharp eyes caught sight of Alaric, a tall man with a distinctive scar across his cheek. There. At that table. Alaric was found at a blackjack table, his expression dark and brooding. His 2 personal guards stood close by, their eyes cold and vigilant. Alaric's lips were a thin line, and his fingers drummed impatiently on the table as he lost yet another hand. His mood was toxic, and his body language screamed of pent-up anger. Rabbit's Foot slid into an empty seat at the table, his eyes sharp and his demeanor enigmatic. He played a few hands in silence, observing Alaric's growing frustration. After a particularly bad loss, Rabbit leaned in, his voice low and mysterious. "You know," he said quietly, "there are whispers that these cards are marked. The house always wins." He reached inside his coat and, to Rabbit's surprise, drew a gun. Rabbit's heart skipped a beat, he thought all weapons had been confiscated. Yet here was Alaric, armed and dangerous. "If these cards are marked," Alaric growled, "someone's gonna pay." He aimed the gun at the dealer, his voice menacing. "You think you can cheat me?" he snarled, his voice trembling with fury. "Get me a new deck. Now." The dealer, pale and shaking, nodded frantically. "Right away, sir." As the new deck was brought over, Jack, blending into the background, used his sleight of hand to swap it with a marked deck. Alaric's mood shifted dramatically as his luck turned. His giddiness was almost childlike as he won hand after hand. His laughter echoed through the room, drawing curious glances from other patrons. Harlequina, seizing the moment, approached the bar. She leaned over, giving the bartender a sultry smile. "Send a drink to the gentleman at the blackjack table," she purred, her voice dripping with seduction, "from me." The drink was delivered, and Alaric, now in high spirits, accepted it with a broad grin. He looked around and spotted Harlequina, who gave him a slow, inviting smile and beckoned him over with a finger. Alaric waved to his bodyguards to follow and swaggered over to Harlequina. "Thank you for the drink," he said, his eyes gleaming with newfound confidence. "You're welcome," Harlequina replied, her voice low and smooth. "I couldn't help but notice your skills at the table. Quite impressive." Alaric smirked. "It's all about reading the game," he said, his chest puffed up with pride. "Perhaps," she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you'd like to join me for a smoke in the private lounge? I'd love to hear more about your luck and maybe share a bit of mine." Alaric's eyes flickered back to his guards, suspicion gnawing at him. He smiled thinly, but the wariness in his gaze was unmistakable. "Go ahead and smoke," he said, his tone cold and distant. "I'll wait right here at the bar. But don't take too long." Harlequina hid her disappointment behind a sultry smile and nodded. "Of course, Alaric." "I won't be long," she assured him, and with a graceful turn, she headed towards the smoking area. Meanwhile, Jack prowled the casino floor, his eyes scanning for an opportunity. The first security guard he approached was a burly, no-nonsense type. "Excuse me, can you point me to the toilets?" Jack asked, trying to sound innocent. The guard didn't even look at him. "Figure it out yourself," he grunted, walking past without a second glance. Jack's frustration simmered, but he kept it in check. He moved on, spotting another security guard who seemed more approachable. With a deep breath, he approached the second guard. "Excuse me, could you tell me where the smoking area is? It's my first time here, and I'm a bit lost." The second guard smiled, his demeanor much friendlier. "Of course, sir. It can be a bit confusing here. I'll walk you over." Jack forced a grateful smile. "Thank you so much. I appreciate it." As they made their way to the smoking area, Jack chatted casually with the guard, masking his anxiety. When they arrived, Jack's eyes lit up as he saw Harlequina. The guard was about to leave when Jack grabbed his arm. "Wait, could you show me exactly where it is? I want to make sure I don't get lost again." The guard, obliging, stepped into the smoking area with Jack. As soon as they were out of sight from the main casino, Harlequina moved in smoothly. "Thank you for helping my friend," she said sweetly, her smile disarming. The guard turned to respond, but before he could react, Jack struck. The move was swift and calculated, a hard blow to the guard's temple, stunning him. Harlequina followed up with a precise jab to his solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. The guard crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath. Jack quickly knelt down, stripping off the guard's uniform. "Hurry, we don't have much time," he muttered, his voice tense with urgency. Harlequina kept watch, her eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit room. "You did great, Jack. We need to move fast." Jack slipped into the uniform, adjusting the cap on his head. "How do I look?" he asked, a hint of a smirk on his lips. "Like a man who belongs here," Harlequina replied, her voice filled with admiration and relief. Jack stood up, pulling the guard's cap low over his eyes. "All right, let's make this count," he said, his voice now calm and determined. Harlequina nodded, her gaze steely. "We're one step closer. Let's get back to Alaric and find a way into that VIP lounge." As they made their way back to the main floor, Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The disguise was risky, but it was their best shot. He spotted Alaric still at the bar, looking impatient and more irritable by the minute. Meanwhile, Rabbit Foot stood up from the blackjack table, his mind racing with a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. But in the world of Doskvol, sometimes insanity was the only thing that worked. He strode confidently across the casino floor, his eyes locked on the security guard stationed by the door. The guard eyed Rabbit Foot warily as he approached. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff and unwelcoming. "I need to speak with Osvald Cobblepot." Urgently, Rabbit Foot demanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The guard raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Do you even know who you're talking about?" "Osvald Cobblepot is the boss of everyone here. He owns the Iceberg Lounge. What could you possibly have to say to him?" Rabbit Foot leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's in his best interest to talk to me. Trust me, it's urgent." The guard crossed his arms, his expression one of disbelief. "Why would Mr. Cobblepot waste his time with you? What's so urgent that you need to bother him right now?" "I can't divulge the details," Rabbit Foot replied, his voice steady and calm despite the tension. "But if you don't deliver my message, you might be responsible for a catastrophe. Do you want that on your conscience?" The guard hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He looked Rabbit Foot up and down, trying to gauge whether he was dealing with a madman or someone genuinely important. The urgency in Rabbit Foot's eyes finally seemed to sway him. "Wait here," the guard said, his tone begrudgingly respectful. "I'll send a message to Mr. Cobblepot. But if this is some kind of trick, you'll regret it." Rabbit Foot nodded, his expression unyielding. "I understand. Just tell him it's a matter of utmost importance." The guard turned and spoke with his colleague, his voice low and tense. Rabbit Foot could see the other guards exchanging curious glances, whispering amongst themselves. The air was thick with anticipation, every second stretching into an eternity. Harlequina sauntered back to the bar, her movements fluid and graceful, like a cat stalking its prey. She spotted Alaric where she'd left him, nursing another drink, his eyes gleaming with a mix of intoxication and desire. He perked up as she approached, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Back so soon?" he asked, his voice slurred but eager. "Missed me already?" she purred, sliding onto the stool beside him. Her fingers traced the rim of his glass, her eyes never leaving his. "What's that you're drinking? Something strong, I hope." Alaric chuckled, a low, throaty sound. "Care to join me? I could use some good company." He flagged down the bartender, signaling for another round. "I thought you'd never ask," Harlequina replied, her voice dripping with seduction. She leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear. "But, you know, it's awfully crowded here. Maybe we could slip away somewhere more private." Alaric's eyes darkened with interest, the alcohol fueling his boldness. "I like the way you think," he murmured, his hand grazing her thigh under the bar. "But what about those two?" He gestured vaguely at his bodyguards, who stood nearby, their eyes sharp and distrustful. "They can take a break," Harlequina suggested with a sultry smile. Or, they could stay close, just out of sight. I'm sure you're the kind of man who likes a little danger with his pleasure. Before Alaric could respond, Jack appeared, his demeanor professional and unassuming in his stolen guard's uniform. He approached with just the right mix of respect and authority, nodding to Alaric. Mr. Alaric, he began smoothly, Osvald Cobblepot sends his greetings. He hopes your luck is holding up tonight. Alaric blinked, momentarily sobering at the mention of Cobblepot. Osvald, eh? What's he want? Only to show his appreciation for your presence, Jack replied with a polished smile. He's offering a special tour of the machinery room, reserved for our most distinguished guests. A rare privilege, if I may say so. Alaric squinted, suspicion creeping into his drunken gaze. A tour, huh? Why now? What's so special about it? Harlequina leaned in again, her lips brushing against Alaric's ear. Think of it as an adventure, darling, she whispered. Just you, me, and all the time in the world. We can explore everything. Her hand slipped under his jacket, teasing the skin at his waist. Alaric shivered, arousal clouding his judgment. You make a good point, he said, his voice husky. He glanced at his bodyguards, who exchanged wary looks. One of them, a burly man with a permanent scowl, stepped forward slightly. Sir, the guard murmured, his tone laced with concern. This doesn't sound like the usual procedure. Are you sure? It's fine, Alaric interrupted, his tone impatient. We'll go. Besides, who's gonna turn down a tour from the man who owns the place? Jack nodded, maintaining his calm facade. Excellent choice, Mr. Alaric. If you'll follow me, I'll lead the way. The small group moved through the lavish corridors of the Iceberg Lounge, with Harlequina clinging to Alaric's arm, her laughter soft and inviting. Alaric's bodyguards followed close behind, their hands hovering near their concealed weapons, ready for any sign of trouble. As the group exited the lively public area of the Iceberg Lounge, the atmosphere shifted from the bright, energetic bustle of the bar to the more subdued, shadowed corridors that led to the ship's inner workings. The low hum of conversation and clinking glasses faded behind them, replaced by the muted echoes of their footsteps on the polished floors. As they passed through a side hallway, they spotted Rabbit's Foot, his signature flamboyant attire unmistakable, even in the dim light, leaning casually against a wall. He was deep in conversation with one of the security guards, the two of them exchanging animated gestures and bursts of laughter. The guard, usually stoic, seemed unusually at ease, clearly charmed by Rabbit's Foot's. Jack, ever vigilant, subtly tried to catch Rabbit's Foot's attention as they walked by. He slowed his pace slightly, giving a small wave and raising an eyebrow, signaling to Rabbit's Foot that something was in motion. But Rabbit's Foot was too engrossed in his lively exchange, his back partially turned to the group, seemingly oblivious to Jack's attempts to connect. The guard he was speaking with seemed just as distracted, clearly enjoying the conversation more than his professional duties should have allowed. Harlequina, clinging to Alaric's arm, glanced back briefly, her gaze flicking to Rabbit's Foot before returning to Jack. There was a slight tension in her smile, an unspoken question passing between her and Jack. But with Alaric pressing forward, his attention completely focused on her, there was little time to assess the situation. Jack, his expression tightening for a moment, hoped Rabbit's Foot knew what he was doing. The success of their plan hinged on everything falling into place perfectly, and Rabbit's Foot playing his part was crucial. They could only trust that he was keeping an eye on the bigger picture, even if he appeared to be enjoying the moment a bit too much. As they continued on their way, Jack couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. Little did any of them know, Rabbit's Foot was about to have a meeting with Osvald Cobblepot himself, an unexpected turn of events that could either unravel their plan or provide an unexpected advantage. The small group moved through the lavish corridors of the Iceberg Lounge, with Harlequina clinging to Alaric's arm, her laughter soft and inviting. Alaric's bodyguards followed close behind, their hands hovering near their concealed weapons, ready for any sign of trouble. As they descended deeper into the ship, the atmosphere grew cooler, the lights dimmer. Alaric, emboldened by Harlequina's presence, barely noticed. "You know," he slurred, "I've been to a lot of places, but this is something else." Harlequina giggled, her fingers playing with the lapel of his jacket. "Oh, I bet you say that to all the girls," she teased. "But I have to admit, this place does have its charms. So dark, so private." Jack, leading the way, kept the conversation going. "Mr. Cobblepot takes great pride in his establishment. He wanted to ensure you experienced its finer details. The machinery room is one of the ship's best-kept secrets. Most never even know it exists." "Sounds like my kind of place," Alaric said, his grin widening. "Full of secrets." Harlequina pressed closer to him, her voice a seductive whisper. "And maybe, you'll discover a few more before the night's over." Behind them, Harry Potter kept a careful distance, his presence unnoticed by the group. He followed silently, ready to act should anything go wrong. As they neared the entrance to the machinery room, the tension among the guards was palpable. One of them leaned in close to Alaric, his voice a low warning. "Sir, this doesn't feel right. We should turn back." But Alaric, thoroughly intoxicated and entirely enraptured by Harlequina's charms, just waved him off. "Relax," he slurred. "What could go wrong? We're guests of Osvald, remember?" Jack opened the door to the machinery room with a practiced flourish, revealing a dimly lit space filled with the low hum of the ship's engines. "After you," he said, gesturing with a courteous bow. Alaric, too absorbed in Harlequina's intoxicating presence, didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, dragging her with him, his eyes glazed with lust. The guards followed reluctantly, their expressions tense, but obedient. As the door closed behind them, the room was plunged into a quieter, more intimate darkness. Harlequina turned to Alaric, her lips brushing his cheek as she whispered, "Now, where were we?" Alaric, oblivious to the peril around him, grinned. "Right where we should be," he murmured, leaning in for a kiss, completely unaware of the trap closing in around him. The air grew thicker, more oppressive, the anticipation almost palpable. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed from the shadows, a faint rustle that caught everyone's attention. What was that? Alaric slurred, his voice thick with both curiosity and the alcohol still clouding his senses. Before anyone could react, Harry Potter struck from the shadows with a swift, silent force. One of Alaric's bodyguards dropped instantly, a well-placed hit incapacitating him before he could even raise his weapon. "What the?" Alaric began, but his words were cut short as Harlequina, moving with deadly precision, struck him down. Her movements were fluid, a deadly dance, as she delivered a blow to his temple with a practiced grace. Alaric crumpled to the floor, unconscious, before he even realized what was happening. The remaining bodyguard, eyes wide with panic, lunged at Jack. The two men clashed violently, the sound of their struggle echoing through the narrow hallway. Jack fought hard, using all the training he had, but the bodyguard was strong, and desperation fueled his every move. They grappled against the cold metal walls, Jack's breath coming in ragged gasps as he struggled to gain the upper hand. The bodyguard managed to pin him against the wall, his grip tightening around Jack's throat. "Not so fast," came Harry's voice, cool and quick as he darted out from the shadows once again. With a flick of his wrist, a stunning strike hit the bodyguard squarely in the back. The guard's grip slackened, and Jack, gasping for air, managed to shove him away. But the struggle had taken its toll, Jack's vision blurred, and with a final, desperate swing, he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Harlequina moved swiftly, checking Alaric's pulse to ensure he was out cold. "We don't have time for this," she hissed under her breath, already stripping the unconscious man of his coat. "Help me get him out of here." Harry nodded, quickly assessing the situation. "I'll take care of the disguises. You get Jack back on his feet." Harlequina moved to Jack's side, her fingers finding the pressure points that would rouse him. Come on, Jack, she urged, her voice laced with urgency and just a hint of tenderness. We need you. Jack stirred, groaning as he blinked his eyes open. What happened? Nothing you can't handle, Harlequina quipped, already helping him to his feet. Now, get it together. We've got a meeting to crash. Meanwhile, Harry had already begun transforming himself into Alaric, his features shifting and molding until he was the spitting image of the unconscious man on the floor. With a quick spell, he completed the disguise, even mimicking Alaric's slightly disheveled appearance. How do I look? Harry asked, flashing a quick, mischievous grin. Convincing enough, Harlequina replied, already donning the bodyguard's uniform. She tied her hair back, pulling on the guard's cap and adjusting it until she looked the part. The transformation was striking, she moved with the authority and cold detachment of someone used to handling trouble. Jack, now standing albeit unsteadily, took a deep breath. Let's hope this works. Don't worry, Harry said, adopting Alaric's slightly drunken swagger as he adjusted his collar. With you escorting us, they won't suspect a thing. The trio, now fully disguised, moved with purpose through the ship's corridors. With Jack leading the way, and Harry and Harlequina playing their roles to perfection, they were just another group of high-profile guests making their way to a private meeting. All they had to do was get there, and the next stage of their plan could begin. As they approached their destination, the tension hung heavy in the air. They were so close now, every step bringing them nearer to the mysterious gathering they needed to infiltrate. The stakes had never been higher, but with their cunning, quick thinking, and a bit of luck, they might just pull it off. In the dimly lit corridor, Rabbit Foot stood casually leaning against a wall, engaging in a light-hearted conversation with the security guard stationed there. He flashed his usual easygoing smile, but underneath, his mind was racing. He was waiting for the moment he had both anticipated and dreaded. The time to meet Osvald Cobblepot, the notorious mob boss who held the Millennium Eye, had finally come. The guard's earpiece crackled, and after a brief exchange, he turned to Rabbit Foot. He's ready for you. Rabbit nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known this meeting would be dangerous, but the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. With a deep breath, he followed the guard down a narrow passage, feeling the oppressive weight of the ship's interior closing in around him. The door at the end of the corridor opened with a creak, and Rabbit stepped into the room. Inside, Osvald Cobblepot sat behind a large, ornate desk, a cigar smoldering between his fingers. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and his presence filled the room with an almost tangible sense of authority. 3 security guards flanked him, their expressions cold and unreadable. Welcome, Rabbit Foot, Osvald said, his voice smooth but with an underlying menace. He leaned back in his chair, a thin smile curling his lips. Or should I call you by your real name? Victor. Rabbit's heart skipped a beat. His eyes widened in shock. No one knew his real name. He had kept that secret buried deep, hidden from everyone, even his closest allies. How could Osvald possibly know? Osvald's smile widened, his gaze never leaving Rabbit's face. Surprised? You shouldn't be. The Millennium Eye is a powerful tool, one that allows me to see into the very depths of your mind. There's very little you can hide from me, Victor. Rabbit Foot, Victor, felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories of the Millennium Eye's power, but experiencing it firsthand was a different matter altogether. It was unnerving, terrifying even, to have his thoughts laid bare before this man. You know why I'm here, Rabbit said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I believe I don't even need to tell you. Osvald chuckled, a low, sinister sound that sent another shiver through Rabbit. Oh, I know many things. My trade is information, after all. I can see why you're here, and I can see you intend to betray those who sent you. You seek an alliance with me, isn't that right? Victor nodded slowly, realizing there was no point in hiding anything from Osvald. Yes. But the question is, what could I possibly offer you? You're a man who already has everything. Osvald's smile faded, and his expression turned cold. He leaned forward, the intensity of his gaze pinning Victor in place. Offer me an explanation, Osvald demanded, his voice now laced with a dangerous edge. Why should I allow you and your friends to walk free? And why should I give you what you want? Why should I give you Jerome Valeska? Victor hesitated, his mind racing. He had to choose his words carefully, one wrong move, and this could end very badly for him and his crew. Yes, Victor finally said. I am here looking for information on the location of Jerome Valeska. Tell me your price. Osvald took a slow drag from his cigar, exhaling a plume of smoke before speaking again. I want you, Victor. Your servitude. Are you willing to spy on your friends on my behalf? To follow my orders without question? Victor swallowed hard, the weight of Osvald's words settling heavily on his shoulders. He had come here with the intention of striking a deal, but this was something else entirely. You want me to betray the crows? Osvald's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. Why not? You've already shown you're willing to betray them once by coming here. What's a little more betrayal between friends? Victor felt the full force of Osvald's words, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He was trapped, and he knew it. The only way out was through, but the cost was almost too much to bear. I need more than just information on Valeska, Victor said, trying to buy himself some time. If I agree to this, what else are you offering? Osvald's smile returned, but this time it was more of a sneer. You think you're in a position to negotiate? Don't be foolish, Victor. You're mine now. Do as I say, and I might consider giving you what you want. Defy me, and you and your friends will disappear without a trace. Victor's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the full extent of the trap he had walked into. Osvald was offering him a deal, but it was a deal with the devil himself. There was no easy way out, no room for hesitation. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. Victor, still grappling with the weight of Osvald's demands, steadied his voice and decided to push back. He met Osvald's gaze, trying to convey a confidence he wasn't sure he felt. You think you can just mess with me? Go ahead, read my mind. See the dealings I've had with demons in the past. See the debts I owe. Do you really want to bring such dark energies into your business? Osvald's smile remained fixed, but his eyes gleamed with something darker, something almost predatory. He didn't say a word as he rose from his seat, cigar in hand, and strolled over to a large, curtained window that overlooked a room below. With a slow, deliberate gesture, he pulled back the heavy drapes, revealing what lay beyond. All right, Victor, Osvald said, his voice as smooth as silk but with an undercurrent of danger. I'll play your game. But first, let me show you something. Victor, his heart pounding, moved closer to the window and looked down into the room below. The sight that met his eyes sent a chill through him. The room was arranged like a small auditorium, with about 30 people seated in rows, all of them hooded and cloaked, their identities hidden. The atmosphere was tense, the silence heavy. On one side of the room stood a small stage, and atop it rested a glass box. Osvald gestured for Victor to stand beside him. Watch carefully, he murmured, his tone one of sinister amusement. You might find this enlightening. Meanwhile, in the conference room below, Harry and Harlequina, both in disguise, sat among the cloaked figures. Harry shifted uneasily in his seat, his instincts telling him something was terribly wrong. He leaned closer to Harlequina and whispered, "Something's off. I can feel it. We need to stay sharp." Harlequina scanned the room with practiced eyes. "This is big," she whispered back. "These aren't just any criminals. These are the top dogs in Doskvol's underworld. Whatever's happening here, it's important." The lights in the room dimmed slightly, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. A man in a sleek tuxedo walked out, exuding an air of confidence and charm. He took center stage, his smile wide and engaging, immediately commanding the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily through the space, "thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Leopold, and I have the distinct pleasure of being your host for this evening, representing none other than the esteemed Mr. Cobblepot." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. Leopold continued, his tone light and conversational, clearly enjoying his role as a showman. "Now, I know what you're all thinking, what could possibly bring together so many of Doskvol's finest? And by finest, of course, I mean the most notorious." A few chuckles spread through the audience, easing some of the tension. Leopold grinned, clearly pleased with himself. But jokes aside, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious note, "Tonight is truly special. You see, tonight you'll have the opportunity to bid on something that could change the balance of power in this city forever." As he spoke, an assistant appeared from the wings, carrying a small metal box. The assistant placed it on a stand next to Leopold, who opened it with a flourish, revealing a small, metallic ball, about the size of a football. It gleamed ominously under the lights, an intricate design etched into its surface. Leopold held the object up for everyone to see. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Vladher, the ultimate weapon against your enemies. Compact, discreet, and devastating. This little marvel can eliminate targets with terrifying precision, and most importantly, leave no trace behind." Harry's heart sank as he watched from the audience. He leaned closer to Harlequina, whispering urgently, "This is bad. Really bad. Whatever that thing is, it's dangerous." Leopold, oblivious to the growing unease in the room, continued his presentation with a gleeful smile. "Now, I know what you're thinking, Leopold, you handsome devil, how can something so small be so powerful?" He paused, allowing the crowd to chuckle again. "But I assure you, this little beauty is more than meets the eye. The Vladher has been developed with the latest in cutting-edge technology, designed to strike fear into the hearts of your enemies. With just a single command, it can do what entire armies can't, end conflicts before they even begin." Leopold's smile widened as he addressed the room, his voice smooth and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, words are all well and good, but seeing is believing. Let's have a demonstration, shall we?" The audience murmured in anticipation as an assistant emerged from the back of the stage, struggling with a terrified orangutan. The monkey's eyes were wide with fear, its cries filling the room as it was forced into the glass box. The sound of the creature's distress was jarring, unsettling the more sensitive in the crowd, but most watched with a morbid fascination. Leopold's grin didn't waver. "Now, I'm sure you're thinking, but Leopold, my enemies are a little more sophisticated than this." He paused for effect, glancing around the room as a few chuckles rippled through the crowd. 3 people, clearly amused by the dark humor, laughed a bit louder. But the humor quickly drained from the room as another assistant approached the stage. This one had a menacing grin that seemed to grow wider as he dragged a man onto the stage. The man was bound and beaten, his face bruised and bloodied. Harry Potter and Harlequina, hidden among the cloaked figures, stiffened in horror. "Adrian Blackwood," Harry whispered urgently to Harlequina. "He's a cipher for Law Nick. He was captured recently, but I didn't think." Harlequina's eyes narrowed in anger, but there was nothing they could do. "Not yet." Adrian was thrown into the glass box with the orangutan, his body crumpling to the floor. He was barely conscious, but his eyes flickered with a dull recognition of his surroundings. The assistant who had brought him on stage let out a booming, evil laugh, as though he'd just heard the best joke in the world. It echoed through the room, cold and callous, making Harry's stomach turn. Leopold, unfazed by the twisted scene, raised the Vladher high for everyone to see. "This, my friends, is a highly concentrated form of Vladher. In its purest state, it kills in less than 30 minutes. In a diluted form, it can take days, even weeks, but the end result is the same, no survivors. The choice, of course, depends on how quickly you want your enemies out of the picture. He pressed a button on the device, and it began to flash with a pulsating light, emitting a steady beep. Without hesitation, Leopold threw the ladder into the glass box. The moment it hit the floor, it released a thick, gray smoke that rapidly filled the enclosure, obscuring the view inside. The room was filled with the horrifying sounds of the orangutan's frantic screams, soon joined by Adrian's agonized cries. The noise was gut-wrenching, a chorus of pure pain and terror that clawed at the nerves of those in the audience. Blood splattered against the inside of the glass, painting it with the gruesome aftermath of what was happening within. Harry's stomach twisted, his face pale as he watched helplessly. He could see Harlequina's knuckles turning white as she gripped the edge of her cloak, her jaw clenched in fury. But they had to stay hidden, they couldn't afford to blow their cover now. As the sounds from the box died down, a heavy, dreadful silence fell over the room. The smoke slowly dissipated, revealing the lifeless bodies inside. The orangutan and Adrian lay motionless, their bodies twisted in unnatural positions, blood pooled beneath them. Leopold turned back to the audience, his smile as wide as ever, though now it seemed more sinister, more twisted. And with that, let the bidding begin. A silent but intense bidding war erupted among the cloaked figures, each one more desperate than the last to claim the deadly weapon. Harry and Harlequina remained seated, their minds racing as they struggled to comprehend the horror they had just witnessed. They were in the middle of something far more dangerous than they had anticipated, and the stakes had just become deadly real. Rabbit Foot stood frozen, his eyes locked on the carnage unfolding below. The orangutan and Adrian's agonizing deaths had left him reeling. He could still hear their screams echoing in his mind. Beside him, Osvald Cobblepot stood with a cold, calculating expression, his 3 guards poised and ready to act at a moment's notice. Osvald turned to Rabbit Foot, his voice dripping with menace. "So, do you still think you want to make an ally out of me?" he asked, his tone mocking and dangerous. Rabbit didn't answer. His mind was racing, trying to process the horror he had just witnessed and the deadly implications of the weapon that had been unleashed. His silence only seemed to amuse Osvald further. "Of course," Osvald continued, a cruel smile curling his lips, "I allowed you to see this for my own amusement. But I think you know that you can't leave with this information." One of the guards raised his weapon, the barrel pointed directly at Rabbit Foot. Another guard approached, his eyes narrowing as he locked gazes with Rabbit. The guard's eyes flashed with a familiar power, an attempt to erase Rabbit's memories. Rabbit recognized the skill immediately, he had seen Jack use it countless times before. But this time, Rabbit was prepared. A protection sigil, hidden beneath his skin, flared to life, glowing faintly through his flesh. Rabbit's thoughts raced, a silent thanks directed toward Constantine for the protection he had inscribed upon him. The sigil had saved his memories. Osvald's eyes gleamed with dark amusement as he observed Rabbit's quick defense. "You're full of surprises, Victor," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Rabbit knew he had to act fast. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, enchanted item, the veil. With a quick incantation, he activated it, and the room was suddenly plunged into thick, impenetrable darkness. Only Rabbit could still see what was happening. Panic erupted among the guards. Spooked by the sudden darkness, they raised their weapons and fired wildly into the void. Bullets whizzed past Rabbit, one grazing his arm, sending a sharp jolt of pain through him. Another bullet struck Osvald in the shoulder, and he let out a furious scream. "Get him! Don't let him get away! Stop shooting me, you fucking idiots!" Osvald roared, his voice filled with pain and fury. The chaos was Rabbit's opportunity. Moving swiftly and silently, he saw his chance to escape unnoticed. But something compelled him to do the unthinkable. With a quick decision, he lunged toward Osvald, pulling the crime lord to the ground. He pressed his hand against Osvald's bleeding shoulder, applying pressure to the wound. "We are not enemies, Cobblepot," Rabbit whispered urgently into Osvald's ear. Not today. Remember that. As the veil's darkness began to dissipate, the room gradually came back into focus. The guards, still on edge, immediately apprehended Rabbit, dragging him to his feet. But before they could do any further harm, Osvald's voice cut through the tension. Stop, Osvald commanded, his voice cold and authoritative. The guards froze, uncertain. Osvald slowly got to his feet, his sharp eyes locking onto Rabbit's. There was a strange look in his eyes, something between anger and admiration. I like you, kid, he said slowly, his tone almost begrudging. You've got balls. You'll still be useful to me yet. Rabbit's mind raced, trying to make sense of the unexpected turn of events. But before he could speak, Osvald continued, a sinister grin forming on his lips. I'll be kind to you, Victor. You have 5 minutes, a head start before my men start hunting you and your friends again. This time, if I catch you, you won't survive. Rabbit's heart pounded in his chest. He opened his mouth to question Osvald further, to try to understand the crime lord's intentions, but Osvald simply glanced at his watch, the smile never leaving his face. Tick-tock, goes the clock, Osvald said, his voice almost playful, yet laced with a deadly edge. Rabbit didn't need any more prompting. He turned and bolted out of the room, his mind racing with thoughts of how to find his friends and escape the inevitable hunt. Every second counted, and he could feel the weight of Osvald's threat pressing down on him as he sprinted down the corridors, desperate to make the most of his limited time. Rabbit foot sprinted through the dimly lit corridors of the ship, his heart pounding in his chest. Panic clawed at him with every step, and his mind raced with thoughts of how close he had come to death in that room with Osvald. He couldn't shake the image of the glass box, the screams, the blood. He knew they had to get out, now. Rounding a corner, he nearly collided with Jack, still in disguise as a guard. Rabbit grabbed him by the shoulders, his voice a frantic whisper. Jack, there's no time. We need to get out, right now. I'll explain everything at the base, but we've got to go. Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. What happened? Where's Osvald? And what about Harlequina and Harry? They're still in the meeting room, Jack replied, his voice tense. They managed to infiltrate, but they're stuck there until the auction ends. Damn it! Rabbit cursed, his eyes wild with fear. I'll secure a lifeboat. You get them out. We're running out of time, Jack. Jack hesitated for a split second, trying to piece together what had Rabbit so spooked. But there was no time to question. He nodded sharply and turned on his heel, heading toward the meeting room. Rabbit watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were all in way over their heads. Without another moment's delay, he raced toward the deck to find a lifeboat. Meanwhile, Jack reached the meeting room, his mind racing as he tried to keep his composure. He slipped inside, scanning the cloaked figures until he found Harlequina and Harry huddled together near the back. Their faces were pale, terror etched in their eyes. As soon as they saw him, they rushed over. We need to get out of here, Harlequina whispered urgently, her voice laced with sorrow. Jack, it was awful. They killed Adrian. We were too late, and now we can't leave until this damn auction is over. Harry's voice trembled with fear, his eyes darting around the room. Jack, that thing, whatever it wasn't just a weapon. It's something much worse. We need to leave, right now, before anyone realizes we're not who we say we are. Jack's confusion deepened, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. Whatever they had witnessed in that room had shaken them to the core. He clenched his fists, the gravity of the situation starting to sink in. Okay, we're getting out. Just stay calm. Rabbit securing a lifeboat. We need to be ready to move as soon as this is over. Harlequina bit her lip, her usually confident demeanor replaced by a deep sorrow. I just want to get out of here, Jack. This isn't what we signed up for." Harry nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. We need to leave, now." Jack's eyes narrowed, suspicion gnawing at him. "What exactly happened in that meeting? What did you see?" Harlequina shook her head, her voice trembling. "It doesn't matter right now. We can't talk about it here. Just trust us, we need to go." Jack could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that had been in Rabbit's when he'd found him in the corridor. Whatever had gone down in that meeting was worse than he could have imagined. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the growing worry gnawing at him. "Let's get the hell out of here." As the auction finally concluded, the three of them slipped out of the room and made their way to the deck. Rabbit was already there, anxiously pacing by the side of a small lifeboat. When he saw them approaching, he waved them over frantically. "Get in, quick!" Rabbit urged, his voice a desperate whisper. "We've only got minutes before they realize we're gone." The three of them clambered into the lifeboat, Jack helping Harlequina and Harry in before jumping in himself. Rabbit untied the ropes with trembling hands, casting one last glance over his shoulder at the ship before they began lowering the lifeboat into the water. As they drifted away from the ship, the sounds of the auction faded into the night, leaving only the lapping of the waves against the boat and the heavy silence between them. Rabbit sat hunched over, clutching his wounded arm, his mind still reeling from the chaos of the night. Harlequina stared out at the dark water, her face a mask of sorrow. "We lost him," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Adrian. I didn't think it would end like this." Harry sat beside her, his eyes wide with terror. "What was that thing? Whatever it is, it's going to change everything. We can't go back to the way things were." Jack, though confused and growing increasingly worried, tried to remain calm. "We'll figure it out when we're back on land. Right now, we need to focus on getting home." Rabbit looked at each of them, his voice tense with urgency. "We're not safe yet. Osvald gave us a head start, but it won't last. We need to disappear as soon as we hit shore. No one can know what we saw tonight." They all exchanged grim looks, the weight of the night's events pressing down on them. As the shore of Doskvol loomed closer, the reality of what awaited them began to sink in. They had escaped with their lives, but they knew that this was only the beginning. The shadows of the city held more dangers than ever, and the crows were about to find themselves entangled in something far more sinister than they had ever imagined. As the lifeboat neared the shore, Rabbit's mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. Whatever secrets they had uncovered tonight would change everything, and he wasn't sure if they were ready for the storm that was brewing on the horizon.